gang, it is 5:30. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Second thing on our agenda tonight is roll call.
Lonnie Rainbow.
Here.
Mike Baker.
Here.
Janice Baker.
Here.
Kat Stone.
Here.
Tom Trotter. He's there.
Here.
Tom? Okay.
Sarah is absent and Mark is absent.
Perfect.
Is Mark okay? Because we haven't seen him.
I haven't seen him like two or three meetings.
Is he only
been
been absent for the last 4 or 5 meetings now? 6 or 7
Isn't there
meetings
something
now?
we're supposed to do about that?
I think Cheryl tried to contact him the other day. I was unable to reach him.
All right, let's go ahead and stand for the flag salute. Pledge of allegiance. Mike, you want to lead us?
Yep, I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Little pause there. I thought, did I say it wrong?
Okay, so item number 4, the budget hearing. There was enough of a difference between what was posted as a legal in the paper and what would be approved in the budget hearing that we're going to go ahead and postpone that, repost it with the corrected information or updated information from our budget hearing, and then we'll have that budget hearing in June. So that'll give us still 30 days to post. We figured, right?
I figure if I can get it posted tomorrow, Cheryl, if I can send it to the news review tomorrow, they can get it posted. And we should have the 30 days before our next board meeting, so we can do it at the board meeting.
Yes, as long as we get it onto our website, that kind of negates the lag time with getting it in the news review.
So I need to send it to the same place I sent it to for the news review and to Cortec, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll move to item number 5, the consent agenda. We have 5.1, April 11th, 2022 regular meeting minutes, 5.2, the April 25th, 2022 special meeting minutes, and 5.3, April preventative maintenance reports.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mike, a second by Kat. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 6, April financial report. Sherry, turn over to you.
We should be working at about 82% of our budget right now, and we're doing really well. We're payroll is falling at about 74%, and material and services are about 76%. So we're still doing really well there. Some of the income, it looks high, but it includes, I think we talked about it in the past, but I'll just reiterate, but it includes some of the quarter 2, 3, and 4 from 2020 to 2021. So that's why it looks like we have way more than what we asked for. But 5310 is about 74%. So it's only got quarter 1 and 2 in there. So we're getting ready to submit quarter 3 reimbursements. The STIF or STF is at 75%, and SCIF, we've received all the money. We've got 4th quarter in April for them. So we're up to date with them. Medical transports, we're still profiting about 11,534 a month. Payroll's at 74%. And we just signed 2 new advertising contracts, one with State Farm and one with ODOT. So we're going to be waiting to get some of their graphics so we can send it over to the graphic designer. But those should bring in about 28,000 in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah. Any questions?
25,000, how much? A year?
28,000 a year. For
28,000.
those, yeah.
For those 2.
Well, that's for the 4.
Oh, that's their
Yeah,
all 4.
we've
Okay.
got 4 of them. We've got one more that's still pending. I'm just waiting to hear back from them. So that would it up a little bit.
Okay.
Entertain a motion to accept the April financial reports.
I'll move.
Second.
We have a motion from Kat and a second from Mike. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment on agenda items only. Do we have anything? Any public comments? Hearing none, we'll move to item number 8, new business, 8.1, draft TMP presentation. And so, Krista, we'll turn this over to you.
I see I'm muted. All right. Just getting situated here. Let me pull the chat screen up just in case we get questions as I go. Thanks everybody for having me here today. Really appreciate your time, and I'm excited to share back with you this draft transit master plan. Start getting some feedback and hear your thoughts. With that, I'll jump right in. I'm going to do a quick schedule recap on what the process we undertook so far is and how we've got to this point, and then primarily focus on 3 sections of the transit master plan. It largely recaps a lot of work we did with the existing conditions, identifying needs, and really focuses in on what exactly are the projects, what types of support do we need to implement them, what other management marketing activities should be undertaken, and what are some supporting policy and code amendments that local jurisdictions can adopt to encourage the use of transit in their communities. Got some time for discussion and a little bit of what's next as we finalize the plan. Jump right into the schedule. This has been about a year-long process that we got started last May. Went through the summer, did some outreach in terms of an onboard survey with an online component, stakeholder outreach calls to a few groups, really got an understanding of that existing conditions and had met with you all at that point to report back on what we had heard. Over the later fall and winter, really dived into what the needs and specific opportunities in terms of changes to service hours, routes, new services, what was the full range of what was out there, and then into this winter evaluating and prioritizing those. So we're here now with the draft plan. We've got about a month left or so, and hoping to be back with you in June and with a version that incorporates your comments, a final TAC meeting, and a public comment period. So backing up to the original intention of the Transit Master Plan, it is a planning document meant to provide strategic guidance to UPTD, including prioritize short, medium, long-term opportunities on the routes and services, bus stops and facilities, coordination and other strategies. Ultimately, looking to have a multimodal transit system that increases ridership on existing routes, examines how services can be improved, and better coordinated to meet transit service needs. Coming out of that vision, we had developed a set of goals and policies, just showing the goals here today, but each of these has 5 or 6 policies, specifically how we would achieve these things. Goal number 1 was to provide improved transit services for residents, employees, and visitors throughout the county. 2 was to enhance coordination with key partners and stakeholders. 3 was to promote livability and user convenience throughout the county. And 4 was to establish an environmentally and financially sustainable system. So what we're looking to recommend, we were aiming to be within existing projected funding sources. Went through a needs assessment and generally categorized those needs into a few categories. Heard a lot about interest in additional hours or areas within Roseburg itself. Additional or modified service to Riddle and Sutherland came up a lot, but we heard from every single community throughout the county that they wanted new transit service or more transit service. An interest in tourism and recreation, using the bus service not just to get to medical, shopping, work. How can we access different opportunities and enhance livability through that means? growing populations inside urban growth boundaries. So much of the growth that we are expecting in the next 20 years in terms of population and employment, we would expect to be within cities, which really drives both the need for the local transit services to be enhanced in all the communities and the need for more intercity connections between them. And on the flip side of that, expecting the people in our rural areas to be increasingly transit dependent tends to be an older population or populations with more physical disabilities that make traveling on their own difficult. Got a number of service enhancements across the board, so not particularly tied to geographic areas, but the interest in increased service frequency, hours, and weekend service. Improved education, marketing, and partnerships. A lot of people didn't know about what services were out there. Updating the vehicle fleet. We know as fuel prices continue to climb, that tends to drive up the price of operating services. Before COVID, a lot of the buses were at capacity on ridership, so having the appropriate amount of seating as well. Other components there. Improving travel times, a lot of feedback on highway congestion, getting stuck in traffic with the bus and looking at ways to address that. Bus stop amenities and access. So where our stops, a lot of them, I know in your most recent STIF, you had a lot of funding for new shelters. Definitely heard interest in that from the public, and tools and technology as well, things like real-time vehicle arrival information. As far as funding sources, wanted to bring up a number of things. Those ones that aren't bolded are things you either already get or are pretty standard for a lot of transit agencies, but we saw a few key areas where we would expect funding to change more drastically. One of those is if the Roseburg area became a metropolitan planning organization, that would change from those 5311 funds to 5307. The most similar agency in Oregon is Josephine County in terms of population density and size. And that would look closer to $1 million in increased funding compared to the rural source. Another option there, if STIF were to be increased or a similar revenue source at the state level. And then some other local fundings, whether that's changes to contributions from cities or other local taxes and fees. Generally, when we think of that MPO change, statewide or local increase, we're expecting those things a little bit further out, closer to the medium or long term, especially as census rules are changing. We'll have to wait and see about where Roseburg's at. So where that left us, and this has been shifting a little bit as services get put back into place with vehicles and drivers coming on board. But we're looking at our STIF plans as it should generally near the existing funding. So that light green color, medium green color is kind of a give or take about what we're getting today with some cushion for moderate changes to those funds. The really substantial changes are in that gray, which is the MPO STIF increases. Again, those things that would be $1 million or more in changes to funding. All of these are shaded scenarios of just one funding change. In reality, we might see 2 or 3 things happen in the next 20 years. So just something to give us an idea of what would we be talking about when we say, what happens if Roseburg becomes an MPO. So with that in mind, let's jump into some project lists. So we've categorized these into 2 buckets, one of those being fiscally constrained. Typically within the existing budget or within something we might expect to happen in 5, 10, 15 years. Unconstrained, anything where funding is unlimited, a magical world where that's happening. But if opportunities come up sooner, being able to at least have them identified in a plan and take advantage of whatever that funding may be. Sorted those into time frame, again, largely based on funding, but also based on stakeholder interest, triggers like new development or increases to population, and so on. So let's jump into this. So we had a number of project sheets up front in that plan, and I'll zoom into each one of these a little closer. But that'll tell you by kind of area of the county or type of service, what's out there today, what's funded in the near term in terms of STIF, and what are we putting in that short, medium, long. There's also a few other components to that. What are the key benefits from our evaluation results? What do we think would happen with those, and what are their trade-offs? The potential funding sources, depending on the type of service we're recommending. The key partners who would be you would need to engage to get those on the ground, and what types of support implementation is needed there. So I'll step through these one by one. Starting in South County, we have our existing Route 99, a modified Route 99 that's essentially the express version of the 99, just additional trips to the furthest points of South County, or rather Canyonville, and the collector. So collector being one of those that's STIF planned, have that in place. We were recommending that more frequent service of the 99 in the short term. And then in the midterm, expanding service hours, both weekdays, some later evening service on the South County collector, and across all of these, getting to 7 days a week. And you'll see that 7 days a week consistently throughout. I won't read all of these, but things this does: improves ridership potential and access, especially for transit dependent populations, express and local service to South County, increased connections to health facilities, other transit routes and providers and employers. Funding sources for something like this, we would expect city contributions, state funding. With how much these services stop, we wouldn't expect STIF inter-community grants necessarily, or MPO, since this is likely beyond the boundaries of where an MPO would be drawn. So those are the types of considerations with that. Partnering up with the communities, employers, and the support needed is things like expanding vehicle fleet to increase the frequency of this service. Planning for additional storage or maintenance facilities in local communities. So we're starting to get these things that are less of spurs out of Roseburg and more localized throughout the county. Having a local facility for vehicle storage and maintenance can reduce a lot of deadheading and kind of wasted time, not operating the bus, but not actually operating service. Vehicle location data, trying to understand where on the highways do we have those bottlenecks, working with ODOT to explore if bus on shoulder in those different points or in different areas might be helpful. It's really exciting seeing some of the other organ providers start getting those, the first ones on the ground here, and it can be really nice to be attractive and competitive if you're stuck in traffic and the bus is whizzing past you. And then using passenger count data, getting that out there to identify high priority stops where people are coming and going, and start building out those with more stop amenities and walking and biking access. Okay.
I would just mention that if the area did become an MPO, Winston and Green would definitely be drawn into it.
Right, yeah. And Myrtle Creek, Riddle, Canyonville, likely not. So when we're prioritizing that funding and which services are being operated in what ways, wanted to keep that in mind too. Okay, won't be reading the bottom sections of these next ones, but I'll give an overview of the projects. So moving into Roseburg, we have our red line, green line that are existing today and going to be modified in routing. And then the collector that would also be a STIF project. So all of those, the route changes that result in the increased frequency and the collector are all STIF projects, nothing in the short term here, and then moving it to 7 days a week in the midterm. Then looking to bring that collector back up to 30 minutes, increased frequency in the long term. Focusing in on Sutherland, we've got the near-term route modification that provides a little bit more. We heard a lot about West Sutherland in particular, and further north into Oakland. So that would be a short-term change, and then also in the short term looking at increasing service hours and frequency. and then going into that 7-day a week in the midterm. And I'm happy to jump back if you're looking through and a question pops up. Focusing in a little bit more on Winston, just wanted to highlight the route change to the gray line. So there's that change that comes down to Roseburg Forest Products, and then a little further out, Ingram Books. So increased access for employers there, recommending some shorter term frequency increases, and then in the midterm, 7 days a week. Zooming out, I'm highlighting 4 of the city inter-community routes. 2 of these already operated by our partners, by CCAT and South Lane Wheels, but looking at increasing services on those and getting the other Lifeline routes back out on the road. So the near term, having those few days or few trips a day, a few days a week services. And then as we move into the mid and long term, increasing how frequent and how many days those are running. And lastly, split this one off as it's a little different, Crater Lake service. So this would be a seasonal, kind of closer to what the Lifelines would be of 2 days per week, 2 trips per day. Could focus this on summer recreation. We've seen a lot of success with those services throughout Oregon. And look into winter, of course, there's some roadway closures and considerations with that. All right. So we didn't have a lot of stop level ridership information. So what we had done with the bus stops was outlined some guidance on when and how to implement bus stop improvements. So there's a 1-pager just after the route changes talking about considerations for neighboring land use, customer use, and coordination opportunities to get these on the ground cheaper and faster. And then a guidance of what the different types of amenities we typically see are, how much does it cost to purchase that item, and at what stop level do you want those amenities there. Again, it's just the purchase of the item, so things like installation, permitting can drive up that cost. Okay, we'll jump into the management plan. We've broken this into 3 categories: coordination, customer service, and fare policy. Coordination, a lot of this is tied to those goals we set out at the beginning, but partnering with employers was really critical today, especially with that stiff funding coming from payroll dollars. Wanted to enhance that. So there's some happening already, but continuing to look for those opportunities. For your discounted transit passes through employers can be really successful. Especially in their first few weeks on the job. We tend to see folks wanting to get around cheaply. Could also explore past programs and future employer connections, especially with an MPO change. If an area does become an MPO, employers of a certain size are required to have a transportation demand management plan, which often has those strategies like providing the discounted passes or otherwise partnering with the transit agency. Continuing to coordinate with local partners, including the other transit providers nearby, as well as looking to coordinate the shelter placement, other improvements with the roadway owners, ODOT, city, county, others. Coordination strategy has a number of things related to the performance monitoring, benchmarking. That was something we had done in a prior memo. And how to use those to identify trends in use of the system, potentially shift how you're implementing service or how you're prioritizing, even within the midterm bucket, which of these things do we need to do first? Considering additional monitoring and feedback from riders in the community and what other types of data can we obtain to track in the future. got a few items in there about increasing customer and stakeholder satisfaction, promoting awareness with some strategies outlined further in the draft plan, and seeking feedback from community-based organizations, especially using those groups to educate the public about transit services. Some disadvantaged groups don't really want to hear directly from the transit agency, and they may have a trusted partner that they'd prefer to talk to and ask questions to. So working with those organizations can be really beneficial there. Adjusting fare policy, we hadn't recommended any changes to the policy itself, but continuing to review that and look for ways to ensure you're balancing that revenue, ridership, and equity. I know one thing we had looked at was fare free. What would that mean for potential changes to ridership, revenues, local match? Ultimately didn't recommend that here, but that's things like that were what we're looking for. And then new fare technologies, a lot of interest out of the survey, and mobile ticketing using their phone or an app to be able to purchase, and other partnerships as the region grows. Customer service and information, again, heard a lot about people not understanding the services, being able to have one clear brochure or graphic to quickly recognize what's out there today can be helpful. Testing those brochures with the public. I'm very used to looking at a route map and figuring it out, but people need to read things differently, so potentially having different versions depending on your audience. Mobile application technologies, that's at automated vehicle location. Again, a lot of people interested in seeing if their bus is running late or if I've still got time to catch it, and implementing that with kind of mobile trip planner. Training programs kind of related to the community organization, being able to teach people how to use the services, provide a lot of training resources for bus operators, customer service to make sure your staff is up to date on changes as things move forward, especially as a lot of these recommendations require a lot of new staff to get them going. A little repetitive, these overlapped with the prior sections, but bringing it back together, fare policies, a lot of interest in that mobile ticketing. People mentioned challenges getting tickets or paying exact fares. Also helps reduce your administrative efforts of counting, collecting, processing. And then fare reciprocity, especially as those connections to neighboring providers increase, looking at, how can someone ride the CCAT bus and not think they need a UPTD pass to be able to do that. All right, policy and code amendments. There's a large table I'll skip to in a second. It breaks out the types of language that could be built into code to promote the use of transit. So that includes language specific to coordination, land uses themselves, development standards, like where you're placing your sidewalks versus the buildings, access and what you're requiring in terms of the bus stops, on private property or near private property, and parking, designing not only the vehicle parking to make it a little easier for the bus, not having a huge lot before you can get to the front door of a business, but also looking at bike parking and where that can be supportive of transit as well. So you'll see probably 5 to 10 of those example strategies if you'd like to read through those. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, go back and expand on anything further, or hear other feedback.
Or what jumps out at me right away. I'm really glad and blessed to be a part of this. I wish I'd been part of it earlier and knew what was going on and what a NPO means and how long we have before that happens. But I really found myself distressed by the transit dependent populations in rural areas that we're only talking about elderly and disabled, because millennials and Gen Z don't have any money, but they really like living out in the rural areas. They can't afford a car. They don't want to drive, and a skateboard is long ways to ride from Camas Valley or from Crater Lake or Tiller or wherever. And that looking 20 years in the future, it's not going to be the elderly or disabled that we're really going to have to look at. As a matter of fact, 5 or 10 years from now, I think that it's millennials and Gen Z. They don't buy cars, they don't pay automobile insurance, and they're going to move to a city. And if they can get high-speed internet out there, which it looks like maybe we're going to get in the next 5 or 10 years, that we're not going to be moving grandma and grandpa around, and we need to make it available. We need to think about younger people, not older people. And I'm really sorry that I wasn't involved in this part. I'm really, really, really thrilled to see the Crater Lake route. Want to know more about connecting with Deschutes County? Bend and Deschutes County are growing. They've got more money than God in this state. The population is more affluent, and they're more into tourism. And I just think we need to find a way to tap into that money pit over there. That we really need to be thinking about that, connecting with them and making it very easy for us year round. I mean, they don't hide in their house when it snows because they got sunshine, and they don't hide in their house when it rains. And I really think that we need to put some focus on that. And those are just my thoughts looking at this thing really fresh. Since I wasn't involved, that's my fault. I know it. But those are my thoughts.
Those are great. Yeah, thank you. I'll make a note. I mentioned elderly and people with disabilities, but the full dependence analysis we had done earlier on did include youth populations, low income, zero vehicle households, people of color, veterans, I believe. I'm trying to remember my full list, but we did look at more than just elderly and people with disabilities there. But always a good.
Do you have a little breakout with those kind of notes that I could look at?
I can send that list and the full memo that has all of them. We included county scale maps and a lot of zoom ins to the community. So it was probably longer than the full transit master plans. We didn't pull it all forward, but I can definitely pull that and send it through Cheryl. And then great point on Bend as well. You know, there's other transit connections that go, you know, from Josephine County over and from Lane County over. So we're making those connections probably in a little more roundabout way right now, but we can take a look at that. Thank you.
I just figure if we're dreaming, we can dream big. Because it's important that we reach out to those places that have more money than we have and do partnerships with them. I just feel.
Krista, was there any discussion around the routes? So, you know, one of the things that was identified, I really like, was on the South County Light route. It had some of the neighborhood circulators, and or maybe they're not called neighborhood circulators, but they had some circulators. What are they called? Collectors. So maybe I'm thinking something a little bit different. But anyway, in the Roseburg area, is there any thought? You know, there's a lot of the transit route is along a lot of places that you would want to go to, but they're not necessarily around where you're at. So it's not always easy to get to the bus. But if you had some neighborhood circulators, you know, that went through, you know, south of downtown or different areas of town, it'd be easier to ride the bus and make the connection. I just was wondering if that had been looked at.
Yeah, let me jump back to the Roseburg slide. We did do some playing around with the different routes and had a few options for each of the areas. I believe, I know initially, without the collector, we did some activity center mapping. So looking at where the population densities were and where activity centers were, so we could get the origin and the destination. And the biggest thing that stood out at the time before we knew the collector route was there's a number of assisted living facilities up in the northwest part of town that weren't being served. So we had gone with that route up there and are getting some circulation, not only from the Roseburg local routes, but from the kind of intercity routes that are coming in. We can probably add in a map of, quarter mile of each route. How much are we accessing from the bus stops, and double check that we cover, I think, nearly all of town within a quarter mile with these changes.
Well, I mean, I look at downtown in particular. And your buses are on Stevens, and the buses are on Stevens and Pine. But there's a lot of lower income or transportation disadvantaged folks that live in those areas that, I mean, it's not an easy walk, period. I mean, some of them are pretty hilly over there. But it's fairly dense, I mean, it's dense as far as population, I guess, population or land use goes here, but there's a lot of people there.
Yeah,
but they're really not in close proximity. There are no sidewalks. There's no real good way to add sidewalks because of the topography. So I just kind of wonder if you throw in some of those layers too, Google Maps and things like that. But I just don't feel like a lot of that, a lot of stuff down Douglas Avenue. So I see it looks like you've got maybe some in there up to rifle range. Maybe that's okay there, but yeah, those are just a lot of areas where there's lower income households. I know a lot of people in that area walk to grocery store, used to, when grocery outlet was there. They'd walk from beyond rifle range all the way to the grocery outlet, over 2 miles away, to get groceries and back.
Well, Valin is building new low-income housing out Diamond Lake Boulevard. She's mentioned it several times, and they're talking about Dixonville.
Yeah.
Building low-income housing in Dixonville. I don't know how that's going to fly.
So anyway, it's just the idea. It's just, how do we, is there circulators or something that can go through and pick up, or, where it's easier to access transit for folks, and maybe transfer them to a bus stop, and maybe that gets to your transit hub or something there where different routes can converge and these circulators and people could quickly transfer. But and is there any thoughts in terms of locations for transit hubs? Because I know that was mentioned.
I believe, Cheryl, you had mentioned the old Safeway property. It was a pretty promising location.
That would be optimal, yes. But the city of Roseburg TSP defined an area that they would find appropriate for a downtown transfer station to be located. And it pretty much covered from the end of where Stevens and Pine connect down near Southgate up to about Diamond Lake Boulevard, and then of course partway out Diamond Lake Boulevard. So they defined an area that they found would be acceptable within their plan. So that's definitely something that we're looking at doing, and it is in the plan. A transit center is in the plan.
That was with the old route system. So I'm wondering if as you make changes and modifications, is that, I mean, those sound appropriate locations, but is there another location, or is there something maybe now more central, or that would work with a different route system in there? And I'm wondering if one of the projects is actually just doing a study to identify potential location. I think the one by the Rite Aid and Safeway, the city has looked at transferring those or selling off or whatever, redeveloping those properties a couple of times. But a lot of that has also involved, or has also included getting rid of the right of way of Rose Street in between the two properties. So that doesn't mean that that's gonna be a location that works. Anyway, just maybe keep our options open, I guess, is all I'm saying,
Mhm.
along with potential new routes.
Definitely.
Is that a route through the VA?
Yes. That's
Like this?
it's the existing South Lane Wheels VA to VA service.
No, oh, okay, that's.
Any other questions for Krista? Great presentation.
Thank you, Krista.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me.
Krista.
Cheryl, I think we're to you for your general manager report.
So actually, I don't have anything in writing for a general manager report, but primarily what we worked on this last month was the low no grant for the electric buses, charging infrastructure, and the preventive maintenance facility. So rewriting that grant when I found out that we would be getting the funding through the 5339, and then also the COVID funding, doing that grant as well. And of course, working with Krista on this final TMP and or draft TMP. There is an open house that we'll need to get you information for. I believe it is the 19th.
Yes.
Yes. So we're gonna have the draft TMP available with Kittleson and Associate is gonna come down. There is a bicycle event that is happening downtown Roseburg on the 19th, and they're gonna start at the Blue Zones. Well, it was the Blue Zones office, but now they've renamed to a different name. And then it's going to end with dinner at a downtown restaurant. I believe that was at Alexander's. So they were going to kind of funnel some of the folks over through our downtown Jackson Street office so that we can get that public comment on the draft TMP as well to add into the comment that you guys had for her tonight. And then that's, yeah, those were the primary projects. I mean, there's always putting out fires in between, but those were the real focus on.
Did I see you were in Kansas? Is that right?
Kentucky.
Kentucky. It was a K.
Betting on the ponies.
Yes, I'm here for the CTAA conference. So tomorrow and Wednesday I have workshops, and then Thursday and Friday I have intensives for training. One of them is the electric bus infrastructure training.
Excellent. Thank you, Cheryl. Item number 10, ODOT update. Jennifer.
Yes, don't have a ton of stuff. I'm on the committee that gets to help select the CARES grants. So we're going to be doing that in the next couple of weeks, and then should be seeing the statements of work coming your way. I got them all completed and they're in the queue up in Salem. So just waiting on finance folks up there to attach them to agreements, and then we'll get those sent out, and hopefully we'll have them to you for your next meeting so that you can get those approved and executed before July 1. And then you can start ordering those other buses and all the other fun stuff you get to do with those funds. And other than that, we have a quarterly meeting May 25th in Brookings. We're going to go over, it's going to be in person and also on Zoom. But going to have some of our folks from Salem talking about some of the things that they do and getting reacquainted with people after the last 2 years of who knows who is who in our area. So, and then Marcia's last day was last week. So Marcia is officially gone from ODOT. So we're kind of breaking Susan in slowly as she came from active transportation and doesn't have a whole lot of background in busing, but she's very bright and will come up to speed quickly. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Item number 11, not on agenda items. Does anybody have anything? No?
No.
We'll go to item number 12, public comments. Anybody have anything tonight?
Dash, no?
Going once, going twice, okay. Item 13, agenda build. The only thing that I heard or have is the budget hearing for the FY23 budget next meeting. Anything else? I'm
I
sure,
think
What
We
time do
had-
we want to make that meeting?
same time. It's
Three
regular meeting.
Oh.
I think I also heard possibly the transportation master plan. Did she say that was coming
It
back?
is on the 19th, it's the open house,
It's the open house on the 19th.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
and, but they might have it ready
for adoption on the next meeting, yes.
the next.
The other thing is we had been working on a fare-free presentation for you so that you would have information to make that decision on. And we decided to postpone that. We had some challenges with staff, so we'll have that ready for you next time as well.
Perfect.
So I thought I heard that we weren't gonna do fare free.
It was not necessarily recommended in the plan, at least not as a long-term thing. But it was something that we had been considering just due to the economy right now.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you, because that was alarming to me.
So the budget hearing meeting, I'm sorry, it's gonna be 5:30, same as the budget or the board
Yeah, the
meeting.
same way that it is right here.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else for agenda build? Hearing
I should
nothing.
remember that one.
Our next regular meeting will be June 13th, 2022, 5:30 right here. And time is 6:17. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.